Welcome to a pivotal moment in the world of podcast as we proudly present the Men's Mental Health Show featuring the renowned Larry Mabry in collaboration with the Maassen Group. This essential exploration of men's mental health wouldn't be possible without the invaluable support of RainerAvenueRadio.world. Now, let's dive into this crucial conversation with Larry Mabry and the Maassen Group. Your mental well-being matters. Here's Larry Mabry.
Hey, what's up, guys? Welcome to this, February 23rd, 2026. Today, I want to talk about bandwidth, right? What is bandwidth? Well, how I look at it is we all have a certain amount of mental energy that we could devote to things. And when that mental energy is put to the test, unfortunately, it takes away from us having enough wherewithal to handle and complete tasks. And so I wanted to kind of talk about that today. Why is that important? Well, I know for me, and just men in general, a lot of my clients, it's a challenge sometimes to say, hey, to raise your hand and say, you know what, I need help. And so I want to lead by example and just say, hey, I need help, right? But actually give examples as far as what that looks like. I think sometimes because of male masculinity, sometimes we feel like we have to handle everything on our own. I don't know if it's more societal, or I don't know if it's egoic. I don't know if it's us feeling like we're tough guys. I know for me personally, as I've matured and grown, I'm like 54. My dad is like in his 70s. I feel like, we are who we are based on the people around us and what we learned, right? And so when I think about my stepdad who passed, and I think about my dad, it's like that emotional aspect, that's not something that's really celebrated. And I would say as I deal with clients who are younger or people who are more in tune with themselves, it's something that, they feel comfortable with, right? And I know for me, as I've evolved, I realize it's important to just be honest. But having that honesty sometimes can be a challenge, right? Because, there's vulnerability there. You feel like you express yourself and then the other person, they may not accept it. So you pull back. And so it could be rather daunting. So today I wanted to kind of talk about, having that mental bandwidth and kind of how to navigate that, right? And so mental bandwidth is not just a poetic phrase. It's a very real, very finite cognitive and emotional capacity that gets stretched thin, especially for our African-American men, or just men in general, who've been conditioned to carry everything quietly and keep it moving as if nothing weighs them down. And it's really interesting. I have conversations with clients, females, males with this. And I've had interesting conversations. I've had people that say, Larry, I noticed that you're very in tune with your emotions, and we can have that conversation. And then I've had certain clients say, oh, well, I've noticed that you're not really, letting me know a lot. And so I want to kind of talk about that. So is it safe, right? Sometimes as a man, it could be very uncomfortable to divulge, what you're going through. I can only speak for myself, but I'm sure there's some other men out there that can kind of relate to this. Sometimes I feel as though if you speak to certain people, or it could be members of the opposite sex, it could be actually other friends or family or coworkers. Sometimes if you don't feel comfortable with that relationship, sometimes people can, I would say, manipulate that, right? They can manipulate you expressing yourself, which when you deal with people who play with your emotions, right? Then it doesn't make you feel comfortable with expressing yourself. And so when you're going through a vulnerable time, you may not want to express it because you're thinking, okay, this person has a history of playing with my emotions. So are they going to really take what I'm sharing seriously? Right? That's important. And then you're not apt to say, hey, I'm feeling this, I need help. That's one thing. Two, think about, like, as you were maturing, you're growing up, how many people just checked in on you and said, hey, I just want to see how you're doing, right? I want to say I appreciate those individuals. You know who you are. Last week, I had a couple people just tap in on me and say, hey, I'm just doing a mental check. And I really, really, really appreciate that. Sometimes it's just good to just check in with people and just see where they're at. And just not to say that you need to unleash everything on them, but sometimes just to check in, just to know you're alive, right? I feel like sometimes, as men, we have a lot of tasks we need to take care of. And, we get into this mode where we handle tasks But, when are people just check in and say, hey, I'm just checking on you, just see how you're doing. And I don't need anything from you. I'm just checking in for you genuinely. And so as you do certain things to kind of take care of your mental health, you'll notice that you'll have more mental bandwidth, right? And that's that ability to just kind of get things done. And if you're just inundated with a lot of tasks and things that you do, and people aren't honoring your emotions, and that it can really weigh heavy on you. And what's ironic is, we as men, we kind of get into this, I like to call hamster wheel, right? Where we're constantly, okay, I got to take care of this. Okay, I got to take care of this. There's a honey-do list, right? There's a personal list you're working on. You're working out, you got the job, you got all these things that you have to take care of, which are important. But I got to ask you this question. I want you guys to come closer. When have you really just took some time to take care of yourself? Right. And so it just got me thinking about that. Right. And I feel like it's important to make sure you value and honor your men's mental health, to separate the bandwidth, to really take care of that. Right. What does it look like? Well, the first thing you want to do is every day you have to check in with yourself. And I had a friend of mine, we had a real conversation, and, she shared something with me that I thought was profound. And I would say, if you can have somebody that you can talk to that keeps it a buck, I think that's vital. And she said, I want you to tell me your emotions and not your what you're thinking. And I thought that was really profound, because I think as men, a lot of times we express, what we're thinking, but the emotion aspect is a little bit different. And so I'm mentioning this because I feel like if we are thinking a lot, which we do all the time, and we're not honoring our emotions, then we kind of create a reality where we're fragmented, right? And I'm noticing that as I'm talking to my clients, and even certain struggles that I'm overcoming, right? It's important to make sure that we honor that. And so as she and I had this conversation, the cool thing is, I had a relationship with her where we could just keep it a buck, right? Keep it 100. And she said, yo, what are you really feeling? And there's a lot of things, and I feel like, you need to address the emotion. If you're pissed off, if you're frustrated, if you're excited, whatever you feel, right? And she was sharing that, there's this thing that she noticed as far as this imposter syndrome or type thing or whatever. And I thought about that, honestly. And I think kind of what came to mind for me was, for those people that are chiming in, I was talking about, taking care of my dad. And it's a weird situation because it's like, he gave birth to me and I'm kind of giving back, but I kind of feel like, how do I really, if I have a challenge that I have to go through something, like how can I really talk to him about it? Where, he wasn't really there with me, like every step of the way my stepdad was. And so I had to really kind of deal with that. And sometimes there's things that's like, in terms of the bandwidth, there's things that's latent, right? That's like, I would say in the subconscious that kind of come out as situations evolve. And then recently, I had a gentleman I did business with, and, we working together, doing some stuff, and he represented my name. And unfortunately, he wasn't really honest, right? And so we talked about that. And so because my name's attached to it, again, bandwidth kind of shaking, right? And so a lot of challenges within yourself that you have to kind of ask yourself, okay, what am I doing to value myself? And so I had another gentleman I spoke to, a mentor of mine, and we were talking about that too, bandwidth. And, he posed a question to me that I want to bring to you, which I thought was really important. He said, well, who's really taking care of you? And I had to stop and sit and think about that. You take care of your dad, you take care of yourself, you take care of your family, you take care of, your household. Who's taking care of you? And I just had to sit with that for a minute. And I was like, damn, you're right. Right. And so through that particular conversation, it kind of got me thinking about, like, am I leaving myself out of the equation, right? And so I'm sharing this vulnerably, but at the same time, authentically. Sometimes we get into these traps, not realizing it, right? I've talked to challenges, or I've talked to clients who, they have families, and then it's like sometimes they have oops babies, and they're like, wow, I'm in a situation, and I got caught up, and now they got 2, 3, 4 children later. They love the children, they love the woman, but it's like the lifestyle and the demand again weighs on the bandwidth. It's like, what are they doing to take care of themselves? And so I put that out there because it's important that we make sure that we take care of ourselves every single day, right? And I talked about going for walks. I talk about having mentors, having a community, the Jedi Council, things of that nature. You guys can chime in the Maassen Group 1 at gmail.com. Feel free to reach out. I can do what I can to support you. But what are you doing to make sure you honor your bandwidth, right? Really, really important. And so by doing that, and the bandwidth basically is unspoken pressure that either we put on ourselves, to be the stable one in the family, to be the leader, to be the head. The expectation is to stay strong, compose, provide, protect, never falter, but it eats up our internal resources and also the bandwidth, the mental space, right? Also, sometimes we have what I like to call emotional self-censorship, right? That's when you're taught to suppress instead of express. And so you end up running two processes. And so right now I want to express it, right? And use this platform to express it and lead by example. Does it feel easy? Absolutely no. It doesn't feel easy. It's very uncomfortable, but it's very necessary. I mean, it's kind of gratifying in a way that I can express myself and kind of express, what I'm going through. But also I know there's a lot of other people going through that too. And so I want to kind of lead by example to make people feel comfortable with that, right? Sometimes isolation could be disguised as independence, right? Because we're handling things on our own. We sound like we're being strong, but often it means that we're carrying more than any person could hold, right? And so what are we doing? As we divert our energies, on just kind of putting this weight on our back, for so long, and we don't raise our hand and just say, hey, I need your help. It weighs on us. It really pushes down the fabric of our bandwidth, our mental energy, but also our life force. And so I want to say, make sure you tap in, right? And I just want to say personally, I appreciate those individuals that I reached out to say, hey, I got you. Rico, appreciate you. Sean, appreciate you. Venetia, appreciate you. A lot of people out there, that I really appreciate, that really care enough to look out and just say, hey, I'm just checking in on you. I think that's important, right? Some people are in my Jedi Council, right? And so think about, what are you doing to kind of maintain your bandwidth? And that's where I realize, like, as I get older, why like food is important, right? If you have the proper nutrients, it's going to put your immune system and your nervous system in a space where it's not more stressed out. You're going for walks, you're pushing yourself, but in a way, moving the lymph, the systems, the toxic things out of your body and that type of thing. That's going to really help your bandwidth too, right? And so if you look at your body in terms of the system, all of it works together. And so it's really, really important to make sure that you put the balance in, right? So you got, the proper nutrition, the proper water, the proper vitamins, the proper support, the proper love. But then ask yourself, are you caring and loving for yourself too? Really, really important. And so right now I'm putting this out here because, is there really a book on like, okay, how do we live the most evolved life, or how do we live the most fulfilled life, right? There's really not a book on that, right? We learn from our environment, we learn from our relationships, whether it be toxic or healthy, right? As people, we learn how to interact. If you grew up in a household where, your parents yelled at you, you think yelling is normal. If you grow up in a household where you feel like, okay, not expressing yourself, that's something that you do, guess what? You're gonna think that's normal. But at the end of the day, there's a balance between both types of lifestyles. And so as you get older, you realize, it's important for you to be the best version of yourself. So therefore, you can make sure that you are honoring yourself, which in turn you'll honor other people, right? And you'll maintain the validity of that bandwidth, right? And so it's important to do that. And so I would say tap into the people who can support you, making sure you can honor yourself and express yourself authentically, right? And so, men often face challenges without social permission to acknowledge them, right? And this creates a paradox. So you need bandwidth to deal with life, but you lose bandwidth by pretending that you don't need help, right? And so it's like this oxymoron, paradoxical type of situation. This is why the conversation about men's mental health is, it's not really about being fragile. It's about basically having the capacity to deal with it. And in our community, there's a huge killer in terms of high blood pressure, dementia. We have a lot of challenges as far as mental. And the question is like, what are we doing to honor that every day, right? If you think about a car, if you don't maintain it, you don't get a tune up, you don't get an oil change, how effective is it going to be? You don't get the tires rotated. How effective is a car going to be in the long run? Well, think about us, right? As humans, if we're not making sure that we're taking care of ourselves emotionally, we're taking care of ourselves physically, we're taking care of ourselves spiritually, how effective are we going to be, right? Have you ever thought about that? And so something to think about, right? I mean, we put a lot of time and effort in a lot of things outside of ourselves, but when do we really sit down and say, you know what? Okay, God or the universe created me, this being, and like, what am I really doing to honor myself? And so I think it's important to make sure that we take care of ourselves in terms of the mental bandwidth, reach out to someone like myself or a colleague or a mentor to help you navigate around that. I think that's important. And also have these conversations, right? I was just talking to a friend of mine, and we talked about boundaries, right? And what I found is really interesting is as you deal with the uncomfortable situations more often, then they don't really become so uncomfortable, right? It's uncomfortable in the beginning, but as you address it more and more and more, you can kind of really get to the crux of what things are, and then actually get to a level of, I would say, peace and tranquility. And sometimes maybe not, maybe just understanding, right? And so what are we doing to kind of maintain our bandwidth? Sometimes you got to take a step back, because if things are too challenging, you have to have enough bandwidth just to face the issue, right? Really, really important. What are you doing to recharge yourself to make sure you have enough bandwidth to handle that, right? One thing I'll recommend is, take stock, take some time for yourself. That might be sitting in peace, meditation, a meal, positive meal, showing yourself love, going for a walk, taking stock and dealing with things from your heart, not from a egoic standpoint. Is it easy? No, it's not. I'm not going to sit here and lie and say it's easy, but I would say it's more beneficial. And it's like a daily practice. It's a daily practice. And sometimes, you go way to the right. Sometimes you go way to the left. I think the goal is to try to navigate it and keep it in the middle, right? If you look at it in terms of metaphorically driving. And so with that being said, I'm curious to see, what do you guys think as far as bandwidth? Do you think this is important? Is this a viable discussion as far as what challenges you're dealing with your bandwidth? Do you feel as though this is relative to you, right? As a man out here, right? Do things change as you get older? Do you find that when you have support, you're at a better situation, you're able to kind of circumvent some things, right? Something for you guys to ponder and think about that. Okay. All right, real quick, I want to go through some promotions. So we got the Call to Consciousness Museum. It's now open till the end of the month, Thursdays and Fridays from 3 to 7 p.m. and Saturdays and Sundays from 11 to 6. Make sure you guys get your tickets at the calltoconscience.world. Check that out. Also, too, we got the brand new R&B mix show, Finding Cloud 9. It debuts tonight at 9 o'clock. Live is going to be hosted by Marta, the Magnificent. So make sure you guys check that out. Looking forward to checking that out. And also make sure you donate today at Venmo at Rainier Avenue Radio. Show some love. Every little dollar counts. We appreciate those people that chime in and donate. I want to say a couple weeks ago, we had an individual donate, I think $100. So we appreciate that. So whatever you can contribute, whether it's $1, whether it's $100, whether it's 1,000, 1,000,000, whatever, we might have some billionaires out there that might say, yo, I might need a tax write-off. So feel free to go ahead and donate at Venmo at Rainier Avenue Radio to help us keep this message going alive. So we appreciate that. Okay. And also too, make sure you guys chime in for AI for everyone and living powerfully with AI. So we before that was a whole different hookup. So make sure you guys check out Dr. Tracy Harrell. She'll be on shortly after. And so curious to see what you guys think about that. So back to that. Now, speaking of AI, what are some AI tools you can use to actually create more bandwidth support for yourself? Let's talk about that. I would say one thing I think that I've been using that's been really beneficial is Copilot. That's been a really cool tool to use to kind of help navigate. Sometimes you can pose some questions to kind of help you figure out some things. I always want to do some research as well, but I think that's beneficial. Another one I think that's been very beneficial too. Everybody know ChatGPT. That's a good one. We also have Perplexity. That's a really cool one too. That's been really beneficial to kind of help you navigate through things, right? Because sometimes, again, you might need other assistance to kind of help you with your job, with your technology, just your thoughts, right? You might just need something to help you with your thoughts, which can kind of help you kind of somewhat organize things, right? Which is going to help relinquish the bandwidth, right? So I just want to kind of talk to you guys about that. I'm curious to think again, like with you guys, what do you guys think as far as, what I talked about with bandwidth, right? We also want to talk about like rebuilding your bandwidth. It's not a weakness. It's a strategy. So if there's a few patterns that tend to help people regain that inner capacity. So you want to definitely name what's draining you. And so if you notice like a spouse, it could be a job that you're doing. It could be certain types of toxic things that you're doing that you got to be honest with yourself. It could be friendships that you have got to be honest and say, man, this is not really helping me, right? And sometimes it could be family members that you might need to relinquish yourself and take a step back from. And you're not to complain, but you just need to understand the load. And then you got to let somebody let a person that you trust, let them inside, right, to support you without judgment. And that takes some talent. It takes some trust, right? Even a single outlet reduces the internal pressure, right? And so for those people I talked about before, right? For me personally, I started going for walks. You can go to the gym. You start hanging out with people who just care about you, just kicking it. You can go out dancing. There's different things to kind of break the monotony to create that space, right, where you have a little bit more going into yourself. Allowing rest, that's really important. And don't feel guilty because you got to rest, because I know sometimes, as men, we work hard and we want to put in an effort, and sometimes we may feel guilty, like, okay, but even God rested on the seventh day, right? And so we got to sometimes just say, you know what, let me sit back and relax and just acknowledge it and appreciate it, right? So you can recharge, count your blessings, and just take stock of where you are, right? Rest isn't a retreat, it's reinforcement. Really important. Dropping the I should be able to do this script to, I'm doing the best I can this moment, right? When you're saying I should, I think that a lot of times, you're looking at the shoulda, woulda, couldas. And at the end of the day, we can only control ourselves. We can't control anybody else. And so we have to really value what we can control. And not get caught up with other people. And I, again, full disclosure, that's an area of growth for even myself. What I do depend on a lot of people, and nobody's perfect. I'm the first one to admit I'm not perfect out here in these streets at all. I would say I'm perfectly imperfect, right? But also just having grace with yourself, grace with other people, and having fun with things, right? Just kind of, having fun with it. The deeper truth. So men don't struggle because they're incapable. They struggle because they often expect to operate with no margin, no softness, and no room to be human. That's important, because I think sometimes, society has pressure on us. Our woman's looking at us, our siblings looking at us, the parents looking at us, and we put this pressure on ourselves. So imagine why we feel heavy, right? You can see where it comes from. And so we have to sometimes take a step back and just say, okay, I'm a lump of clay right now and I have to form myself. And sometimes I can change from day to day. And just, okay, in this space right now, I'm feeling, what can I do to just make this moment better? Really, really important. Okay. And when you give yourself that room, even a little challenge, doesn't feel like handcuffs, right? It starts feeling like heels, right? And I want you to think about, like, okay, so as you guys are going throughout your day, what are some things that you guys can do to to make sure that you are honoring those bandwidths, right? I would say try to eat healthier, even if it's one thing. Like one suggestion, I think, for me when I started working on my healthy journey, is I said, okay, I'm gonna start drinking water, right? Put a little lemon in there, start drinking water. And yeah, I drink juice and stuff, but I noticed just drinking water and flushing my system out. I said, okay, great. I'm gonna start eating more live foods, right? And that means food that comes from the earth. Those little additions are gonna kind of help you. And I've noticed since I've been eating more live foods, I have what I would say like more energy to kind of deal with things. I'm not as fatigued. Again, helping to the bandwidth, right? Because as you pour into yourself, guess what? You have more bandwidth to pour into the universe, right? Some people had to cut off, right? Some people, some toxic friends I had to let go. People want to be combative, go back and forth. I had to sever those relationships, right? Because what I realized too is you have some people that they they're damning to focus on what is not in alignment with you. And I think that's a big realization I realized. Some people, they prioritize confusion as opposed to clarity. And that can cause a lot of bandwidth struggle because in your mind, you're trying to clarify things, but in their mind, all they care about is confusion because it's cute to them, right? Which is unfortunate because that can weigh on your bandwidth. And so it's important to make sure that you provide clarity, but make sure you do it to yourself first and then provide clarity to other people, right? And be honorable with those people who provide clarity to you. Does that mean you're perfect? No, but you might need to practice those types of skills, right? So you can be better, right? Okay. All right, guys. I want to say I appreciate you guys chiming in. Make sure you guys, again, check in with the Call of Conscience Museum. It's going to be open again to the end of the month, Thursdays and Fridays from 3 to 7, and Saturday and Sundays from 11 to 6. We're getting towards the end of the month, so make sure you guys check it out. Get your tickets at the calltoconscience.world. Also, don't forget to show some love to the brand new R&B mix, Finding Cloud 9. It's going to debut tonight at 9 o'clock, live, hosted by Marta the Magnificent. And make sure you guys donate on Venmo at Rainer Avenue Radio. So I want to say without further ado, guys, appreciate you guys. Thanks for chiming in. I'll see you guys next week without further ado. Peace.